It's official. It's Macron versus Le Pen in the next French presidential election as nationalist populists surge to absolutely crush the traditional center-left and center-right. In this video, we're going to take a look at the results of yesterday's first round of presidential elections in France. We're going to see how the traditional center-right and center-left parties absolutely imploded. I mean, you're not going to believe how bad it was. And stick with me to the very end of this video when I'll reveal the one surprising voter group that may turn France decisively and definitively to the patriot right. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you. As always, I am your daily fake news antidote. So come on into your Patriot Professor's Den, where I'll help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Before we begin, I do want to introduce you to an amazing organization called Patriot Switch. You know, we often talk about building a parallel polis here, right? Parallel businesses and structures and institutions to emancipate ourselves from all the woke corporations like Disney out there. Well, Patriot Switch has helped over 2 million patriots all across the country make sure that all their purchases go to support patriotic companies. And the coolest thing here is you don't even have to change anything outside your ordinary routine or the items you already purchased. Patriot Switch will show you exactly how you can start voting with your dollars to support companies that promote and support our values of faith, family, and freedom. So make sure to learn more by visiting Patriot Switch in the description below. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. The nation of France went to the polls for the first round of presidential elections yesterday. And if you don't know, in France, everybody and anybody can run in the first round, and then the top two winners face off in 2 weeks for their runoff election. So a total of 12 candidates were in the running yesterday, and the top vote getters were as follows. French President Emmanuel Macron got the top vote. He came in with 27% of the vote. The Nationalist Populist candidate Marine Le Pen, she came in second at 23%. And the big surprise of the night was the far left but very anti-NATO, anti-EU candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who along with Le Pen surged ahead of the rest of the pack over the last few weeks. He came in at 22%. He was almost a spoiler, but it was not to be. The other Nationalist Populist candidate, Éric Zemmour, he came in fourth with 7% of the vote, which is about where he was polling going into the first round. He has officially endorsed Marine Le Pen for the runoff, and interestingly, Mélenchon, who, being far left, is telling his voters not to vote for Le Pen, although many of them are, he didn't endorse Macron either, which is very, very interesting because that's not how French elections are supposed to work. We talked about this on Friday, but the French presidential election system is basically rigged. It's a rigged system that was established by Charles de Gaulle and the Fifth Republic back in 1957. It's a system where the establishment intentionally puts in 2 or 3 centrists who vie for the top position in the runoff. And when one of the centrist moderates wins the first round, the other moderates, and indeed the majority of the other candidates, all coalesce around the winner and throw their support behind him or her. And in exchange, they get high-ranking positions in the upcoming administration. And with full establishment support, the moderate then goes on to the runoff elections and tends to win by a rather large margin. And what this means is that any outsider from the so-called far right, like Marine Le Pen, she has no structural support for a majority vote in France. Up until this point, conservatives, liberals, socialists, they all unite around the so-called centrist candidate, thereby pushing the National Rally candidate, namely Le Pen, out of any possibility of winning. But like we predicted on Friday, it does look like this rigged system is collapsing with the death of the mainstream center-left and the center-right. When it comes to the withering of the traditional left and right parties, yesterday's presidential election in France was even more astonishing than we predicted on Friday's live stream. Look at this headline from Reuters. France's traditional parties bloodied by vote for far left and hard, for far right and hard left. Why does the left get the alcohol label, right? That's what we call alcoholic beverages, like hard lemonade here in the States. Mike's Hard Lemonade. So you got the far right and you've got the hard left. Okay, whatever. But Reuters is absolutely correct. The traditional left-right parties were stomped yesterday in the first round of voting. The Republicans, the traditional center-right party in France, the party of Nicolas Sarkozy, for example, who was president from 2007 to 2012, you're not going to believe this. All right, scratch that. Yes, you will. Those of us who have to live with rhinos, yes, we will believe this. The center-right Republican Party got 5% of the vote. I mean, it was utterly humiliating. 5% is embarrassing, particularly for the traditional center-right party. As far as the center-left is concerned, which is the Socialist Party, the party of François Hollande, the president before Macron, they did even worse. If you can believe it, again, the Socialists got, I kid you not, 2% of the vote. I mean, this was an absolute bloodbath as far as the traditional center-left, center-right parties in France are concerned. Just to bring this home, the traditional centrist governing parties, the Socialists and the Republicans, together got less than 10% of the vote. Absolutely stunning and humiliating defeat. Altogether, the populist vote, the vote for Le Pen, the vote for Zemmour, they're all the populists on the right, and also Mélenchon on the left. The populist, anti-establishment, anti-globalist vote got over 52% of the vote. The election signaled a very clear shift to the right for France, and we're seeing that with the polls for the runoff. The latest head-to-head matchup poll has the runoff a statistical tie with Macron 51%, Le Pen at 49%. That's a 16-point surge for Le Pen since the last presidential election 2017, and a comparable 16-point drop for Macron. So we're seeing a significant portion of Macron's vote shifting over to Le Pen. And guess who that might be? There's a series of studies that show that there's one surprising voting demographic in particular that's shifting over to Le Pen en masse and may indeed decide the election in her favor. Can you guess who that is? Well, first, what do you think of this cool shirt here? Can you see it? Pravda. It's better than CNN. Is that not cool? Well, you can get your own at hot off the shirt press. It's brand new by clicking on the link below and visiting our merch store. Remember, gang, whenever you purchase something from our store, you're going to be supporting this channel in the midst of our being basically victimized by cancel culture, as well as spreading patriot spirit far and wide. So make sure to click on that link below. Go to store.turleytalks.com. That's store.turleytalks.com. All right, so take a look at this headline. The Daily Mail just published an astonishing YouGov poll that found that 56% of voters between the ages of 18 to 24, so these are your Generation Zers, they back Le Pen. And this is something that's absolutely crushing what's called the cultural backlash thesis. This is a term that's derived from a book that was relatively recently published by two university professors, Pippa Norris and Ronald Inglehart, who argued that the political success of populists around the world, like President Trump in the United States, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, Viktor Orban in Hungary, is because of a backlash made up primarily of white men. So this is a serious thesis out there. The populist and patriot movements around the world are thriving because a bunch of bigoted and racist old white men are reacting en masse against the inevitable demographic and cultural transformations initiated by increasingly non-white migrant populations. But the key to this thesis is that this resistance is only temporary, and that's because we all, quote, know that the youngest voters are the most progressive and liberal ever. And so as these older white voters die out and young idealistic leftists take over, a massive woke wave will inevitably cover the globe. Okay, this is what's known as the cultural backlash thesis. And it's a great thesis for the exception of just one problem. It's wrong in virtually every way. As it turns out, Gen Z is actually the most conservative generation we have on record. And again, we see this with Le Pen's support. In the last election back in 2017, in the first round election, Le Pen got 40% of voters between the ages of 18 and 24. Now, according to this YouGov poll just taken recently, it's now 56%. And the significance of this percentage could be seen comparing it to Le Pen's support back in 2012 when she first ran for president. Back then, her support among voters between the ages of 18 and 24 was just 15%. So we're seeing nothing less than a quadrupling of her support among this age group. It's absolutely extraordinary. And it's all part of France's massive turn to the right over the last decade. As we've talked about endlessly on this channel, the liberal ideological experiment to superimpose a one-size-fits-all political and economic system that seeks to emancipate all populations from cultures, customs, and traditions that liberals now deem to be oppressive and bigoted and racist and sexist and all kinds of phobic, that's beginning to collapse. And this is largely because we're moving from a modernist ideological age that marked the Cold War, and that world is increasingly moving into a postmodernist age characterized by identity rather than ideology. And everyone is going through this change, both the political left and the political right, in this kind of identity politics. But it's the right that's been far more successful precisely because it's pivoted to the left economically, providing economic security that traditional leftist voters have favored. But at the same time, it's doubled down on defending the culture, customs, and traditions of a nation. And as a result, the woke left is looking increasingly ridiculous and out of step with the sentiments of the vast majority of a national population. And so nations like France are turning more and more to the nationalist, populist, patriotic right. Now, of course, we'll see if the rigged French presidential election I spoke of earlier will cooperate with that trend. It will eventually, I believe, but we'll see in a couple of weeks if it will do so now. But until then, there is no question what we are witnessing in France, as well as in Hungary and Poland and Serbia and countless other nations, is indeed the awakening of a new geopolitical order that will eventually bury liberalism once and for all. Now, before you go, you'll definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded on Biden absolutely panicking as 80,000 deleted pictures and emails from Hunter's laptop are about to be published. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.